Hey everybody, I'm here today because I have decided to start a new YouTube series based on my love of film because it's one of my passions. Absolutely adore movies and physical media, and I thought the basis of the channel is ultimately going to be um, reviewing movies that most people think are just terrible that I happen to think are great. I'll be doing movies like Rocky 5 and Last Action Hero. Now, I'm not going to do guilty pleasure movies that I intellectually know are terrible. This is going to be reserved for movies that I legitimately think are great movies that I just think are completely underappreciated, that people just don't like for whatever reason, and I do. So I'll be getting into some of those later, but I thought the best way to start this really was to, I ran into an issue recently that I really felt like I should comment on because it's really been on my mind. And this is actually going to tie into my second video as well. I'm going to have two videos kind of on physical media, the problems that I think exist today in physical media and why, and how I think we're kind of unintentionally helping along the demise of physical media as consumers, which is extremely frustrating to see. But yeah, the first video is going to be on that very phenomenon. In fact, I've been a lot more interested lately in the Blu-ray and 4K and mainly Blu-ray titles that I've been seeing coming out of the boutique studios like Warner Archive Collection, Scream Factory, these new 4K scans of Halloween 2 and 3, which I can't wait to get my hands on, Trick or Treat Special Edition, which is coming out in October as well. And also there's there's lesser titles like Supergirl, which are coming out at the end of this month from Warner Archive. And it's a peculiar thing to be so passionate about a movie like that, which admittedly is not a good film. I grew up with the movie, so I kind of feel like I'm genetically bonded to have to own this movie because it's just part of my story. But I think in a way it's the best way to make my point, because if a title like that is getting released, there's a reason for that, and it's because Warner Brothers is trying to give the fans something that they feel the fans want. If you think about a movie like Supergirl, that is an extremely niche title, which, let's face it, nobody is asking for. There might be a very small contingent out there of people that would love to see it on disc. I'm one of them. But most people, they couldn't care less if Supergirl is going to be on Blu-ray or not. It's not a good movie. Empirically, it's a bad film. Now, there are three different versions of Supergirl. One is the theatrical United States cut, which is 105 minutes. Apparently, there's some, really, really egregious cuts in there. Just make the movie make even less sense than it already doesn't make. Then there's the 125-minute international version, which is the theatrical cut everywhere but the U.S. Movie makes a lot more sense. It's, a lot more coherent, basically. It's considered the preferred version of the film. There's one other version, which is longer, the extended cut, which is 138 minutes. So like another 13 minutes of footage. But by all accounts, it's not necessarily a better film for those 13 minutes. So the consensus is that the preferred cut is the 125-minute international version. Well, Warner Brothers has announced that the version they're bringing out has the 125-minute version in a remastered edition. They're going back to the film's inner positive and remastering it this year on new equipment. I mean, I've seen some screenshots already. They look fantastic. You should head over to cavedwonder.com and check those out if you haven't. They look phenomenally good. Far better probably than the film deserves. But I got involved in this discussion back and forth the other day on a forum I'm a member of. And the person who I was talking to was making the case like his preferred version of the film is the extended cut. And he was upset because Warner is including the extended cut, but they're only including it on a DVD in the same package, so it's only an SD. And a lot of fans were upset about this, but here's my stance on this. Warner Archive was specifically asked about this on their Facebook page. They're usually pretty responsive, unlike a lot of studios, even the boutique labels. And they explained that they went to great expense to try to find the original elements for the internet or the extended version, and they were unable to do that. So the only way that that version, that footage exists, is in standard definition. So when given the option of not including it at all or including it on a DVD, DVD is what we got. Now, some people have looked at that decision as, well, I'm not buying this because if I do that, then I'm supporting inferior product or lazy product. I just want to say that the people that have that kind of logic in 2018 are stuck in 1998. We are not there anymore, guys. We're not at a place where we can just boycott a release, and especially on a title like Supergirl. Again, nobody's asking for this movie. The logic seems to go that, well, if I don't like what Warner Brothers is doing with Supergirl, then I'll just not buy this edition of Supergirl, and Warner Brothers will see that there's no interest and they'll put out a better version of Supergirl. That's not going to happen. In fact, all signs point to this is probably the last time that this movie is ever going to be issued on physical media, period. So you can either support it, have it in your collection, or not, and that's fine. I'm absolutely 100% for anybody's right to support or not support any release that they see fit or not fit to support. It's your money, spend it how you want to spend it. And if a studio is not putting out something that you personally want, of course, then you should pass on that release. However, this person's goal seemed to be to convince other people that this was subpar product from Warner and it should be avoided. And this just simply isn't true. Warner Brothers, as I started this video off by saying, really has no vested interest in releasing a boutique title like this unless they're just trying to be nice to fans. They didn't have to release Supergirl. Nobody's clamoring for that. Very, very few people are clamoring for that. And it's just not going to sell millions of copies. I'm sorry, guys. It's just not. Okay? Warner Brothers didn't have to release any other cut than the cut they wanted to release. Just the fact that they're giving us the extended cut at all, it's out of print. And unless you go to a third-party seller on Amazon or through eBay or something like that where you might get crazy markups, you can't just go to a store and buy it. And that actually leads into my second video, which I'm gonna... that's also a bone of contention with me right now with physical media, is the situation with big box retailers. But I'll get into that. My point is, when you don't support a release on a title like this, especially a title like this, it doesn't have to be a title... like we're not talking about Lord of the Rings here, something extremely popular that if people didn't buy it, the studios would actually have a moment of introspection and go, hey, this should have sold. Why didn't it? Like something like Star Wars. If that doesn't sell, the studios at that point are going to go, why didn't this sell? Nobody's going to care why Supergirl doesn't sell because it's not particularly expected to sell. You're not proving anything, basically, by boycotting a release like this, except to prove to studios like Warner Archive, we don't care about titles like this. And then you're not going to see anymore. And then your only option is going to be streaming, because that's where everything's going anyway. I'm sorry to break it to you guys. I'm a huge proponent of physical media. I love it. But, you know, titles like this in particular, again, it's not a revered title. It's kind of considered a crummy movie, no matter which version you watch. It just is. But it's made for a certain demographic of consumer, and I fall right into that category. I'm almost 40. I'll be 40 this year. And I'm old enough to remember the movie and have a nostalgia for it in my heart. But I'm also old enough to want a physical copy of something, much like music. It's one of the reasons I still collect vinyl. In a way, I find the technology of vinyl to be almost more interesting and hard to parse in logically, how does this work? I find that harder to understand how a record works than I find how a CD works, because a CD, I can understand that because it's digital information, it's ones and zeros. You have a box whose job it is to interpret that digital information and send it through your speakers. That makes sense. I get that. But the reason that I find vinyl so interesting is because vinyl is the only audio format on which the music physically resides. You could argue that it's there in certain form on CD because it's there in digital form, but it is not physically there in the way that you hear it. If you turn off your speakers, you can try this with your turntable if you have one. Turn off your speakers, all your amps, everything. Turn on your record player and put the needle down. You can still hear that record. It's very faint, but it's there because those grooves are the music. And that's one of the reasons why, to me, just on a gut level, I feel like it sounds better because that music is actually being replicated in your house physically, not just digitally. So it's kind of an maybe not appropriate way to make my point because I'm arguing for physical digital discs when it comes to film, but you know, I'm not going to have a bunch of film rails in my house. It's the only thing that's practical at this point. But I also just I hate this idea that we're getting less and less and less these days for more and more and more money. And I can't help, I don't want to be this person who's, you guys don't know how we had it back in the day, but I feel like anybody making that argument is not old enough to have ever owned a Laserdisc player. Okay? Because movies back then, you got one version of a movie for the most part. There were some, again, boutique labels like Criterion that were putting out fantastic Laserdiscs, but for the most part, you got one copy of a movie. Now, something, say like a middle-of-the-road title, like my very first Laserdisc, actually the reason that I bought a Laserdisc player for Speed, 1994. Loved the movie at the time, went to the theater a bunch of times to see it. At the time, that was the only way to get that movie in widescreen, was the Laserdisc. They eventually brought out a widescreen VHS. I didn't know they were going to do that at the time. At the time, nobody liked black bars. They didn't understand that you can't put a rectangle peg in a square hole. They didn't get it. Some people still don't, but that's another issue. Speed was my first Laserdisc, and that movie by itself, no extras, okay? You had side A, which had half the movie. You had side B, which had the other half of the movie. On a disc, that was it. $40. That's $40 for one movie, no extras. So people complaining about a release of a title that Warner really has no obligation whatsoever to release at all, like Supergirl, on Blu-ray in quality that blows away something like we had in the Laserdisc days. And they're offering a package, a brand new remaster. This is another thing. If this was a subpar product, Warner Brothers could have just taken an old SD master that they had lying around, upconverted it, and thrown it on a DVD and said, hey, here's Supergirl for you 20 people that want to buy it. And that would have been that. But they actually invested the time and the money to use new equipment and do a fresh remaster from the interpositive, which is just one generation away from the original camera negative. I've seen screenshots of it again. They've corrected a framing issue that was there on the old Anchor Bay release. I mean, they're actually putting effort into this. And they're giving it to you for $18. 1-8. Not $40, but $18 for something in high definition. And they're giving you an alternate out-of-print cut of the film just as part of the package. Yes, it's in standard def, but it's also out of print. You can't just go buy it anymore. And it's still just $18. People that think we're getting less for more money have very short memories. And I wish that people would think twice before. If you don't want to buy something, again, fine, that's your prerogative. Don't buy it. All for your freedom to not buy something. But don't try to muddy the waters for people on the fence or poison the water, even worse, for people who want to support physical media and you're like, well, this doesn't have all 3 cuts of Supergirl. Ironically, I'm probably a little bit more miffed about the fact that they didn't include the theatrical cut of Supergirl, even though it's supposed to be a far inferior version of the film, just because it's probably the one I grew up with for years on VHS, number one, and number two, that one's actually shorter than the international version, so presumably they could have presented that in HD probably pretty easily via seamless branching, but they didn't do that. So that actually upsets me a little bit more in a way than they're not including the extended cut, which they, like they say, may just not have the access to the elements to make that happen right now. But the fact that we're getting it at all, and we're still getting stuff like that at all, at this stage in physical media, which, again, my next video, I'm going to go into where we are, at what stage we're at with physical media, which is not great. It's kind of a minor miracle that we're still getting boutique titles like this from these boutique labels. And it's the very thing that people that care about physical media and care about the art of film, these are the kind of releases that we should be supporting. I'm not saying you need to go buy Supergirl because it's a terrible movie, but my point is there are plenty of boutique titles being released by boutique labels, and yeah, they're a little more expensive. Well, not even in this case, in the Supergirl example, it's not even that expensive. But some of these other boutique labels are, but those are the very releases we should be supporting, because these are the people keeping physical media alive, because there are people, again, that are in the right age group, the right demographic, they have the nostalgia for it, they want something physical they can hold in their hands, and you know, the day we start looking at a release of something like Supergirl that has no reason to exist on physical media in the first place, I guarantee you Warner Brothers, if they didn't put more money into preserving this film in HD than they're going to get out of it, it's not going to be much of a blowout as far as profit. It's just not. And I wish that people could understand that when you don't support releases like this one, you are actively participating in the demise of the physical media that you want to keep. And all you're going to have very soon is a streaming copy from Netflix that they may not have next month. And you're not going to have trailers, and you're not going to have commentaries, and you're not going to have alternate cuts of a film, even one alternate cut in SD. You're not going to have that because it's all going to be streaming. And we all need to kind of reflect on our own culpability in helping that happen when we see a release like this that, okay, maybe it's not 100% of what we want, but 75%. At least we're getting the movie in HD and it's the best cut, and we have an alternate version. I'm going to buy it and I'm going to enjoy it. And I really hope that sales are strong enough that boutique studios like Warner Archive and Scream Factory, I hope they keep doing releases like this, because this is exactly what keeps me excited. Even now, when physical media is waning so drastically, I mean, you had Best Buy announce just, I think, a week ago that they're no longer carrying CDs in their stores at all. You know, I mean, that's how dire the situation's getting for physical media. And again, next video, all about that, big box retailers. But please support your boutique movie studio titles like this. Don't look at it as, well, if I don't buy this, then they're going to put out something better, because there's no incentive. There's very little incentive for them to release it at all. The only way that you're going to tell them that you want more is to buy this. It's, again, it's not 1998 where you can just, you know, there were examples like Gladiator and Gangs of New York that came out with subpar transfers, and the studios were forced to go back. They were so like heavily panned and avoided that they actually went back and rectified the situation. They're not going to bother doing that with something like this. It's just not in that high demand. So that's my soapbox about boutique studios and boutique releases like Supergirl. I hope you guys, if you like the movie, if you like this video, I hope you like it down below, and I will have another video up very soon. The next one, as I said, it's going to be all about big box retailers and how difficult it's becoming for even people that want to support physical media in 2018 to do so, and how the big box retailers are not helping. So anyway, I'm going to sign off now, guys. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.